Raising someone from the dead as an eyewitness saying, listen, I have been there, you don't want to go there. God will not force anyone in this world to believe. God will not force anyone in this world into paradise. Wicked people refuse to believe because they hate God, not because they don't understand all the time. You see, the 10th and final thing that this man realized, and it's something we should take seriously too, regardless of where we're going, because we know other people who aren't going where we're going, is this. The 10th thing you realize after death is that eternity is forever. And forever ain't no joke. And you see, that's the thing we miss in our Sunday schools. In many ways, I wish some of you were brought up as good Catholics like me. I remember one experience, I didn't get a whole lot, but I remember one experience. I was a little kid going to Catholic church in Guyana, and there was a paper on the wall, and it was black. And it was just black paper. And I'm like looking at black paper, and I'm looking at black, and I'm like, the paper's black. But then at the bottom I read it. It said, this is a picture of hell. And I was like, oh, it's so black. You see, good Catholics, we're taught about hell. A lot of Protestants, you're like, hell, what's that? Is that like being poor? No. You see, I think we need a little bit of balance. We need to understand some underlying principles here. Once again, it's important to know what this parable is saying and what this parable is not saying. I'll say it again. This parable is not saying that poor people go to heaven and rich people go to hell. It's not trying to say that. But what it is trying to say is that money is really important, because it reveals our intentions and our priorities. When you look at the profile of these two people, and you hear the rich man, what did it mean? It said something really cool. He wore purple. In that day, purple was so extremely rare. I think you had to get the blood of a jellyfish and a clam and some other stupid thing and stir it up in a potion. Anyway, if you wore purple, it meant you had money on top of money on top of money. And this guy just dressed exclusively in purple. He wore fine linen all the time. You know what that means? This man just rocked Versace. He wouldn't think of going to Walmart. It would be so below him to wear something from Walmart, even underwear from Walmart. He only dealt with the name brands. This rich man never thought one day, if he ever needed to eat, the food was always there. It's like he lived at Mandarin. He didn't have to think, what am I going to eat today? He just chose. And the rest he threw away. Jesus says this is how this guy lived. You want to know something interesting? I read it. I wasn't there. I didn't see it. But it said that back in the day when you were rich, you wanted to wipe your hand because you ate with your hand. You didn't really have a napkin. What you did is you just get a piece of bread, break it, wipe your hands with the bread, and just throw the bread to a dog. That was a sign of your power and your prestige. Then you look at the profile of the poor man. He's a beggar. In fact, he's the poorest of all beggars. His name is Lazarus. This is interesting. It means the one whom God helps. He's lying at the man's doorstep, likely left there by friends, hoping that as this man throws away his scraps, that some of it will come his way. I want you to see that the man's dogs, this should mean something to us. The man's dogs live better than Lazarus does. Lazarus dreams of being a dog. If I could only be a dog and get some of that bread that's thrown off of the table, my life would be so much better. The dogs also have a double meaning here. At this point, dogs were not the wonderful, loving pets that we now have. They were vermin, to be run off. They were garbage eaters. They were disease carriers. They were like the dogs I grew up with in Guyana, who have no fur and are covered with mange, and the ticks can jump off of you as they walk by. When it says that the dogs licked his sores, you're not talking of little cute cuddly animals trying to help him. What you're seeing is an utterly helpless man. And as the dogs begin to lick his unclean wounds, it spreads the infection more and more and more. And this is a picture of misery. Yet there's a twist. And the twist is the inversion. That one goes to paradise and the other one goes into Hades. Abraham talks about the chasm. And he says, listen, it's a done deal. It's irreversible. There's nothing anyone can do. It's a done deal. God has established this thing. And no matter how we protest it, it's not going to change. But Abraham says something else. You had the choice, bro. You could have listened to the prophets. You could have listened to Moses. Jesus concludes this parable in a strange way. The man says, listen, I got to go get my brothers. But Abraham says, your brothers have a choice. They have the same choice you do. They have the same information you do. Is it important to them? Is it what they want to hear? You see, Luke's readers are listening to this, and they're quiet. The original audience is hearing Jesus speak this, and they're also quiet. And we're listening to this, and we're quiet. And I'm writing this last night, and I'm quiet. You see, this has a way of bringing quietness over our minds. See, we can't miss the point. We can't miss what Jesus is saying. Forever. Not today, forever. Forever, we've always had the dream of Freedom 55. Whether it's the Stone Age, or whether it's now. Whether you live in the jungles of Brazil or you live in Canada. In the jungles of Brazil, you dream of when you could have 45 children who, when you're old, you can lay in your hammock and they will feed you through your mouth. You see, that's retirement for them. Here we wish, man, I hope I got enough RSPs, I got enough ducats, I got enough investments so that when I'm old, I can retire, have a good future. Jesus says, wait a minute. Guys, don't get short-sighted about what the future is. The future is not being old, but the future is eternity. In Luke 12:20, Jesus says this, a man saved for his retirement at the expense of forever. And just when his barns were filled and his retirement was set and he was about to cash in and kick back and say, boom, Freedom 55, RSPs, Jesus says, you fool, idiot boy, you don't know. Tonight, I want your soul. Tonight, this very night, I want your soul. And everything you worked for is gone. See, people who strive to be rich on the earth at the expense of being poor in heaven are the epitome of stupidity. How in the world can you manage to strive for what you can't hold on to at the expense of something that you can have forever? What's the point? Not what's my point. Don't ask me what my point is. Ask yourself what Jesus' point is. Jesus is not trying to say that it's all about being rich or it's all about being poor. But I think Jesus is making these essential points and we can't get away from them. Life lesson number 1. Wealth without active mercy for the poor and the needy is great wickedness in the eyes of God. And number 2, if we close our eyes to the truth we're given, then we'll be judged by that truth. In this context, Jesus is condemning the Pharisees because of their love of money, yes. But he's also condemning them because they're just so blind to everything else that's around them. Everything else that's going on. Their need to love social justice. Their need to be responsible. Seeing the needs of others directly in front of them. And he says this, and it's so huge. Luke 11:42. Listen to this. He says, woe to you, Pharisees. Woe to me, Trevor. Because you give a tenth of everything you have, even from your garden. You won't even grow a tree without pulling off 10% of it and giving it to God. But you neglect justice. You neglect the love of God. You've practiced the latter. Yeah, it's good to tithe. You should tithe. But don't forget the most important thing. God is not looking for the 10.